requiring us to sign up to EU regulations and laws if he wants to get deals on veterinary agreements and so forth. It was the man who wanted to have a second referendum, didn't he?
And he was Brexit Secretary, shadow Brexit Secretary, wasn't he, under Jeremy Corbyn?
We know full well the average British Brexiteer was not voting for sovereignty and so forth.
Keir Starmer's approval rating has plummeted by 15 points following his embarrassing European tour and disastrous media appearances. This sudden drop represents the largest single decline in his entire political career. But numbers only tell part of the story. Behind these statistics lies a tale of political ambition gone wrong, broken promises, and a leader increasingly out of touch with the people he claims to represent. Let's unpack what this means for Labour's future. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Keir Starmer had high hopes when he embarked on his European tour. He saw himself as a statesman, prepared to re-establish Britain's ties with other countries and establish himself as a potential Prime Minister.
Requiring us to sign up to EU regulations and laws if he wants to get deals on veterinary agreements and so forth.
His itinerary, which included high-profile meetings and events throughout the continent, was thoughtfully designed to highlight his diplomatic skills. However, Starmer's hopes of receiving widespread praise soon fell apart. His painful exclusion from the Paris Notre Dame reopening ceremony was his first significant setback. This was more than just a small scheduling conflict. It was an obvious indication that Starmer did not have the influence he believed he had on the international scene.
Because Keir Starmer, Rafe, it would appear, wants to try and get ever closer union with the organisation that we left in 2016.
His carefully crafted image started to show cracks as he stood on the sidelines while other political heavyweights took centre stage. This snub had far-reaching consequences. Political commentators quickly noted that Starmer's exclusion from such a momentous occasion revealed a lot about his reputation abroad. A commentator said, "If Starmer can't even secure an invitation to a cathedral reopening, how can he hope to negotiate complex international agreements as Prime Minister?" As the tour went on, Starmer's efforts to improve his reputation only served to draw attention to his flaws. Given his evident inability to obtain significant diplomatic engagements, his public remarks regarding global challenges and international cooperation sounded hollow.
Was the man who wanted to have a second referendum, didn't he?
And he was Brexit Secretary, shadow Brexit Secretary, wasn't he, under Jeremy Corbyn?
It became more and more clear how his grandiose rhetoric contrasted with his real impact. However, Starmer's European catastrophe had not yet reached its true climax. It was extremely embarrassing for him to meet Donald Trump in the United States, or rather, not meet him. The meeting was hyped by Starmer's team as an opportunity to rebuild the special relationship, but Trump hardly acknowledged the Labour leader's presence. Both social media and political commentators quickly exploited the awkward photo opportunities and stilted interactions that resulted. Former advisor Niall Gardner gave a critical evaluation of Starmer's performance in Washington, calling him weak and woke. This harsh portrayal appeared to sum up the general opinion, which was that Starmer had not had any significant influence on the global scene. The full scope of Starmer's European catastrophe was becoming evident as he boarded his flight back to the UK. Instead of being a triumphant tour, it had cast doubt on his capacity to represent British interests around the world.
Of backdoor conversations going on here, which would appear to be leading to us giving away, once again, the rights of the fishermen of this country.
Now that his reputation was in ruins, Starmer had to face an even bigger obstacle: a hostile British media that was ready to discredit him at every turn. Starmer was about to have a rude awakening if he felt uncomfortable confronting Trump. He was about to endure a torturous 45-minute interrogation by 6 unrelenting BBC radio hosts that would end his political career. What could possibly go wrong with a couple local radio interviews? The air was charged with excitement as Starmer entered the BBC studios. During his European tour, the British media, which is notorious for its harsh treatment of politicians, had been honing their craft. They were now prepared to attack every blunder and contradiction. It was immediately apparent that Starmer was dreadfully unprepared for the first question. He found it difficult to formulate well-reasoned responses to even the most fundamental policy queries. Starmer made a crucial mistake that would follow him for days when he was questioned about the winter fuel allowance cuts. His tone-deaf admission that he had never personally had trouble paying utility bills turned off listeners who were already struggling with the cost of living crisis. Starmer's attempts to shift the topic failed as the interviews went on.
The great Brexit betrayal. This was the man who basically quadrupled immigration, 4 times higher than Tony Blair.
Interviewers quickly cut him off when he attempted to bring up the reintroduction of ASBOs, refusing to let him sidestep their more direct questions. The Labour leader was on the defensive and was frantically attempting to take back the narrative. His interview with BBC Lincolnshire featured one particularly hurtful exchange. The host questioned Starmer directly about whether he had a problem with Lincolnshire and his apparent lack of connection to the local farmers. Starmer's support base was further eroded by his clumsy response, which did little to allay worries about his applicability to rural communities. The public's response to the interview clips that started making the rounds on social media was swift and harsh. Many users called the interviews extremely embarrassing, and others made fun of Starmer's incapacity to give thoughtful responses. Political analysts entered the debate, pointing out that Starmer's communication style was ineffective and unclear, further undermining public confidence in his ability to lead. It was becoming painfully evident how much Starmer's media meltdown had damaged politics. He had gone from being a budding statesman to a leader who was having difficulty defending his policies and winning over voters in just 45 minutes.
We know full well the average British Brexiteer was not voting for sovereignty and so forth.
His leadership and the Labour Party suffered greatly as a result. One question hung over the aftermath of this disastrous media round. Could Starmer bounce back from this self-inflicted injury? Or had he just sealed his political doom? Keir Starmer's credibility has been severely damaged by his European tour and the media appearances that followed. What was supposed to be a demonstration of his statesmanship instead devolved into a string of awkward meetings and humiliating snubs. Starmer's reputation suffered after he was left out of the Notre Dame reopening and his non-event with Donald Trump. But when he got home, that's when the real harm happened. In the face of a flurry of challenging questions from the host of BBC Radio, Starmer broke down. It was painfully obvious that he was unable to connect with a voter's concerns or clearly articulate policies. Social media was ablaze with criticism and jeering as the public's response was swift and brutal. A pivotal question now confronts British politics. Can Starmer recover from this catastrophe, or is his leadership already irreparable? He has enormous obstacles to overcome. He must restore public confidence, offer a strong challenge to the current administration, and somehow get past his reputation as a weak and disengaged leader. The future of British opposition politics and Labour is at stake. The party might have to look for a new leader if Starmer is unable to make things better quickly. Furthermore, a robust and successful opposition is more important than ever for the well-being of British democracy in these turbulent times.